the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Dear brothers and sisters, we are continuing through our readings in the letter that St. Paul writes to the church in Corinth. And at the beginning of the first epistle reading we read this morning was actually from Galatians. The second one was from Corinthians. And the very first thing that St. Paul has to say in this part of his letter is this. He says, "Watch, stand fast in the faith, be brave, be strong." And at first instance, it sounds like St. Paul is giving advice to those who he's writing to. Our father, St. John Chrysostom, says actually it's the contrary. What he's doing is that he's actually correcting them. So what he's trying to say is, when he says watch, he says you're sleeping. When he says stand fast in the faith, what he's trying to say is, I've heard that your faith has been wavering to and fro. Sometimes you are strong in the faith, sometimes you are weak in the faith. Be brave. He's saying, I've heard that some of you have been acting cowardly. And then be strong. Some of them have been weak in their practices and their commitment to the church. But nevertheless, those four things are very, very useful, and I would suggest they are things that we, in our spiritual life, should keep in mind at all times. When we come into, well, for some of us, whether we've been in the church all of our lives or we've been in the church for a short time, this advice applies all the time. And I want to start off with watch. And so Paul is making a point about how to live the spiritual life from the moment we are baptized. It's interesting being in a parish where we have as many newly baptized, newly illumined people, because you get to hear the experiences they have after baptism. I am always interested when I hear that maybe a month or two after a person's baptism, I'll ask them, how are you going? And they go, Father, I don't even know where to begin. And, it seems contrary to what we think should happen. That is, I get baptized, it should all be fantastic. It should be a bed of roses and everything should go wonderfully. I mean, Lord, I've just been baptized. I've come into your church. It shouldn't get any better than this. And yet, we experience the opposite. Think about this. While I'm living in the world, and I'm not following God's way at all, does the evil one need to attack me? No. I'm doing a very good job doing it myself, ruining my own life. And so, when a person makes a decision, I am not going to live the way the world asks me to live or the evil one asks me to live. I will live for you, Lord, according to your commandments. Then that kind of puts up, the red flag to say, here, come and attack me. It's a bit like when the evil one is roaming around and he's looking for somebody to tempt, and God says to him, why don't you tempt my servant Job? He's a righteous man. And so, from the moment of our baptism, from the moment we make the decision, we end up finding that we are under attack after attack after attack. And it's difficult. Because it seems to be one problem after the other, and I'm just trying to find my feet. And so St. Paul is trying to help us to understand something very important. As I said, whether I've been in the church all my life or I've been in the church for a year, I have to be watchful at all times regarding the attacks of the evil one and the little traps he sets for me. If any of you have ever read C.S. Lewis's Screw Tape Letters, this is a good manual on how these traps are laid for us and how subtle these things are. Sometimes, and being watchful, think about this, that if you have a kingdom and it is surrounded by a wall, and on that wall are watchmen, if the watchmen don't do their job, what happens to the city? The enemies are able to come in and get through the wall somehow and undermine that city. And it is no different with our spiritual heart, with our spiritual lives and our hearts. The evil one is constantly trying to attack, finding something that will unsteady the boat, that will just create even the smallest bit of disturbance, so that I then start to falter. And remembering, what is his job? His job is my death, eternal death. That is his purpose. He does not like the fact that we are made in the image and likeness of God, and that he has come and redeemed us and we belong to him. And so being watchful in our spiritual life, and often we think about these things in the sense of the large things. Okay, I think we can mostly agree that, most of us hopefully are not going to be murdering anybody. Those big items that we think of. But, for example, when my spouse says something I don't like, and I shoot back a smart comment straight back. These little traps that we think are so benign, we think there's nothing in it. And yet, think about this. A small crack in a wall leads to a bigger crack and a bigger crack, and then finally that wall is compromised. And once the wall is compromised, then it can be toppled over. It's the small traps. And in fact, you read the sayings of the Desert Fathers, they talk about this a lot. The very small things that we think very little of, they are the big traps. I'm probably not going to face a major situation of, having to steal something or something of that nature, but it's the very, very small things, the everyday things, that we think very little about. That we don't pay attention to. And so be watchful, constantly watching out for the things in my life, those little traps that are there to get me to falter. The second thing he says is, stand fast in the faith. Not everybody, it's a sad reality, but it is a reality, that not everybody who is baptized into the church stays in the church. People fall away for various reasons. But he's trying to make a point about our faith can't be strong when things are good, and then it can't weaken when things get bad. It can't vacillate between these two things. Think about the story of Moses. Moses is told by God to go and deliver the Israelites out of Egypt. And he does that. And he even sees the Red Sea being parted. Now you would think, they get to the other side and you think, well, the job is accomplished. This is victory. And yet, because of the hard-heartedness of the people, they then spend the next 40 years in the desert. And Moses has to deal with a people who are stiff-necked and are constantly complaining. And they are going around and around in the desert for 40 years. But does Moses lose faith because of this? No. Moses doesn't lose faith. His faith continues to strengthen in the Lord. Does Abraham, when he's given the promise, lose faith in God's promise to him that he will have descendants as numerous as the sands of the sea? No, he doesn't lose faith. And this is an important lesson in terms of his saying, St. Paul is saying to the church, be strong at all times, whether things are going well or whether things are not going well. Know that God is God. He reigns over all things. He has conquered all things. And he knows precisely what's happening. I've said it before, but when I bring a problem to God, it is not the first time he's becoming aware of it. It's not like God says, oh, sorry, thank you for bringing this to my attention. I better do something about it. That's not how it works. But we sort of have a tendency to pray like that. And it's a firm knowledge in the fact that I know that God knows what's happening. And that even with the few simple words that I have, sometimes out of grief and tears, I don't have the words to speak. Yet God knows what's happening. So being strong in the faith, knowing that the Lord is King. And then he says, be brave. And I was talking to the students at the academy a little while ago. We were reading one of the Lives of the Saints as we do every single morning. And we were discussing the fact that, well, what does it mean to be brave? And that's a good answer. But the students were saying, oh, it means that that you're really strong and you're not scared of anything. But that's not bravery. That kind of indicates that somehow I don't feel fear. Those who go to war feel fear. And yet, out of duty, they do what's required, even if it means laying down their life in defense of their country. And this is something we should remember, and we should not think that the saints never felt an ounce of fear on what was happening in their lives. Bravery is moving forward despite the fear I have. I feel that I know I'm afraid, but I move forward anyway. And that's not easy. The easy thing would be to look at the lives of the saints and just negate the fact that they had any fear. Now, they went with joy to their martyrdoms, for example. But joy is different. Bravery is moving forward even when I'm afraid. Sometimes God is going to call me to do things that I'm terrified of doing. And you think, God, why did you put me in this situation? I have no idea, literally, what to do. I am the wrong person for the job. Or I don't think I can bear with these circumstances. And God says, this is where you need to be. And so being brave, that things may not be what I desire them to be. And sometimes it shakes me and I don't know where things are going to end up. How is this going to possibly end? Or how am I going to get a solution to this problem? And yet, it is moving forward in faith knowing that whatever the end is, it is always going to be for the good. And then finally, be strong. Be strong in what? In myself? No. Because I'm just a human. And I fail a lot. But where do I get my strength from? Well, the psalmist tells us precisely this. He says, I get my strength from the Lord. It is not that I just exert more willpower in my spiritual life to try and be strong and I'm not going to let this affect me. The saints who went to their martyrdom, as I mentioned before, they went with joy and they were strong. And how did they do that? Because they focused on Christ. The moment I take my eyes off Christ in my spiritual life, the moment I start to be distracted like St. Peter was when he walks out on the water, the moment I do that, I start to become weak. And this is something that we as Christians must comprehend. That our strength comes from Him. Being part of Christ, being sons and daughters of Christ, being in the image and likeness of God. It is He who gives us our strength. Not as the world says, you're strong. You know, I went on a short holiday with my family this week. We stayed at a holiday place, and there were one of these social magazines sitting on the bookshelf as part of reading. And on the front cover was a very well-known Australian person, and the title on the front cover was, "I am stronger than I've ever been." I'm like, boy, I'm sure you are. Until you have your next breakdown, which again will be on the front cover of the magazine. But then, you'll bounce back and, I'm stronger than I ever was, and I'm now stronger than I ever will be, or something along those lines. Whatever the magazine writers come up with is a nice tagline. If I rely on myself, my own self-will, I will go up and down like the waves. But with Christ as my foundation, that is where my strength is. Anybody who knows anything about buildings knows, in fact, if the foundation is strong, the building will be strong. If the foundation is weak, it's only a matter of time before the building collapses. So not looking at myself, but looking at Christ, the cornerstone of my life. May these 4 things be principles that we carry each day, that we think about, that we try to apply. Because if St. Paul thought it was important enough for the church in Corinth, then it's going to be very relevant for us. And may the Lord lead and guide us always.